The automatic doors of Memorial Hope Hospital slid open just after sunrise, and every conversation in the crowded lobby seemed to stop for a brief moment. A man in a worn wheelchair rolled slowly across the polished floor, his military jacket faded with age, his face covered in scars that hinted at battles most people could never imagine. His legs hadn't moved in years, and his hands trembled as he pushed the wheels forward inch by inch. Around his neck hung a pair of weathered dog tags. To the nurses rushing past, he looked like just another disabled veteran waiting for treatment. To impatient visitors, he was simply blocking the hallway. Some stared for a second before looking away. Others sighed in frustration. A few hospital staff quietly whispered that he had probably come to ask for free treatment again. Not one person stopped to ask his name. Not one person noticed the tiny Navy SEAL insignia engraved on his dog tags. But hidden behind those tired eyes was Commander Ethan Walker, one of the most decorated Navy SEALs in American history, a man who had sacrificed everything to protect people who would never even know his name. And before the day was over, the same people who ignored him would stand in stunned silence, wishing they had treated him differently from the very beginning. Ethan had once led some of the most dangerous rescue missions ever assigned to his elite unit. His teammates trusted him with their lives because he never left anyone behind. During one classified mission years earlier, an explosion ripped through the building where his team was trapped. Ethan pushed 3 fellow SEALs to safety before the collapsing structure crushed his spine beneath thousands of pounds of concrete. His teammates survived. Ethan never walked again. After months of surgeries and years of painful rehabilitation, he returned home to discover that fame fades quickly when cameras disappear. His military honors gathered dust inside a small apartment while the world continued moving forward without him. Friends became strangers. Phone calls stopped coming. The hero who had once commanded elite warriors now struggled to carry groceries into his home. Yet he never complained. Every morning he reminded himself that saving even one life had been worth the price he paid. The only thing that hurt more than his injuries was watching people look through him as though he no longer mattered. That morning he had traveled hundreds of miles to Memorial Hope Hospital because of a mysterious pain spreading through his chest and shoulders. After waiting nearly 4 hours, the receptionist glanced at his paperwork and casually pushed it aside. "You'll have to wait longer," she said without making eye contact. "We're busy with more urgent patients." Ethan simply nodded. Years in the military had taught him patience. Around him, several people who had arrived much later were called inside first. Doctors hurried past without noticing him. Nurses discussed weekend plans while walking by. One orderly accidentally bumped his wheelchair without apologizing. Ethan lowered his head, wondering whether this was what becoming invisible truly felt like. For the first time in years, he questioned whether anyone still cared about the sacrifices soldiers made once the uniforms came off. Then everything changed. A young trauma nurse named Sarah Mitchell stepped out of the intensive care unit carrying medical files. She glanced toward the waiting area and suddenly froze. Her eyes locked onto Ethan's dog tags. She stared for several seconds before dropping the files in her hands. Tears instantly filled her eyes. Ignoring everyone around her, she hurried across the lobby and knelt beside the wheelchair. Without hesitation, she quietly spoke 2 words. "Reaper 6. Ethan's head lifted so quickly that even the receptionist looked up in surprise. Only members of Ethan's SEAL team knew that call sign. His tired eyes searched Sarah's face, confused and emotional. "How? Do you know that name?" he whispered. Sarah smiled through her tears. "Because my father never stopped talking about the man who brought him home." The entire lobby fell silent. Years earlier, Sarah's father had served as a Navy medic attached to Ethan's SEAL unit. During that same devastating mission, Sarah's father had been trapped beneath burning debris, unable to escape. Ethan had ignored direct orders to retreat and crawled back into the collapsing building to rescue him. He carried the injured medic nearly 200 meters through smoke and falling concrete before the structure completely collapsed behind them. Doctors later said that if Ethan had been only 30 seconds slower, both men would have died. Sarah's father survived, returned home, raised his daughter, watched her graduate nursing school, and every birthday he reminded her that she existed because one brave Navy SEAL refused to leave a teammate behind. "I've waited years to meet you," Sarah said softly. "My father called you the bravest man he ever served with." By now, doctors, patients, and visitors had gathered around them. The same people who had ignored Ethan only minutes earlier watched in stunned silence as the nurse embraced the quiet veteran. The hospital director, hearing the commotion, rushed into the lobby. When he learned who Ethan really was, his face turned pale. Security camera footage showed exactly how long Ethan had been waiting while others passed him by. Staff members who had ignored him lowered their heads in shame. The receptionist who had dismissed him could barely speak. She apologized repeatedly, tears streaming down her face. Ethan simply smiled. "You don't owe me an apology," he said gently. "You owe the next person in that waiting room your kindness." Those words spread through the hospital faster than any medical emergency. Doctors immediately performed a full examination and discovered Ethan had a dangerous blood clot that could have become fatal within hours. Emergency treatment began immediately, and his condition stabilized. The specialists later admitted that if Sarah had not recognized him when she did, he might never have received treatment in time. Once again, someone else's compassion had saved the man who had spent his entire life saving others. The story soon reached local news stations. Reporters expected Ethan to criticize the hospital for ignoring him, but instead, he surprised everyone. During an interview, he said, "This isn't about me. Every day there are elderly people, disabled people, homeless people, and lonely veterans sitting in waiting rooms everywhere. Most of them don't have medals. Most of them don't have remarkable stories. But every one of them deserves to be seen." Those simple words touched millions of hearts. Donations poured into veteran support organizations. Volunteers began visiting hospitals to assist elderly patients who arrived alone. Memorial Hope Hospital introduced new training programs reminding staff to treat every patient with equal dignity, regardless of appearance. Several months later, the hospital held a ceremony unlike any in its history. Nurses, doctors, firefighters, military families, veterans, and schoolchildren filled the main courtyard. Sarah stood beside Ethan as the hospital unveiled a bronze plaque near the entrance. It carried a simple message. Every patient has a story. Treat them as though it could change your life. Visitors stopped to read those words every day. Many never knew the full story behind them. But they didn't need to, because the lesson was already enough. As the ceremony ended, Ethan slowly looked around at the smiling faces surrounding him. Years earlier, he had believed his greatest mission ended on a battlefield far away. Now he realized his most important mission had only just begun, not fighting enemies, but reminding ordinary people that compassion is the greatest form of courage. Sarah smiled as she gently squeezed his shoulder, grateful that fate had allowed her to thank the man who had given her family a future. The wheelchair that once symbolized loss now represented resilience, honor, and hope. And perhaps that is the greatest truth of all. Never judge someone by the way they walk, the chair they sit in, the clothes they wear, or the silence they carry. Every stranger you meet may be fighting a battle you cannot see or carrying a story powerful enough to change your heart forever. Sometimes all it takes is one act of kindness, one remembered name, or one familiar call sign to remind the world that true heroes are never defined by how they stand, but by how they choose to lift others, even after life has knocked them down. Here's a short, emotional ending. As Ethan quietly rolled out of the hospital, everyone stood in respectful silence. The man they had once ignored had reminded them that true heroes don't always wear medals. They often carry invisible scars. From that day on, every patient was treated with greater compassion Because one forgotten Navy SEAL proved that kindness can change hearts, restore hope, and leave a legacy that no battlefield ever could.